続きまして、リージェネラティブオーガニックアライアンスの代表を務めます、エリザベス・ウィットローさんから貴重な講演をいただきたいと思います。
Good morning. Hello, everybody here in the room and everybody online. Thank you so much for having me. I am honored beyond belief and so excited that I get to be here with you today and share some of the highlights of the work that we're doing at the Regenerative Organic Alliance. I want to first shout out a big thank you to all of the amazing people from Patagonia team who have organized this event. And I dare say we should just give a small applause to everybody for all the work you've done, and thank you so much for having me. I'm going to try to speak slowly so that the interpreters can keep up. I've got a lot of information I want to share with you all today about the Regenerative Organic Alliance, how it came together, who is behind it, and why we want to galvanize a change in the way we farm in this world so that we're farming like the world depends on it. And it all starts here. Oops, there we go. Thank you. We might, there. This is the mission statement and the vision of the Alliance. And we are here to create a thriving future through regenerative organic agriculture. The Alliance, the Regenerative Organic Alliance, I'm going to call the ROA to keep things short, was founded by Dr. Bronner, who you'll hear from later this morning, Patagonia, as Marty just explained, and the Rodale Institute. These were all very leading, iconic brands and organizations who have long held organic as their DNA and questioned the assumptions of business as usual. The founders came together because they wanted to see a different future for agriculture. And they came together and built a vision for the future of agriculture, and they called it Regenerative Organic Certified. And they created this because regenerative organic agriculture has the potential to solve many of our greatest problems that are caused by industrial farming. By using chemicals with farming, they are contributing to climate change and fractured rural economies around the world. Our conventional farming system has degraded our soil. As Marty also just mentioned, the IPCC report, a couple years ago, the IPCC report projected that we only have 60 or 70 harvests left if we continue to conventionally farm the land and degrade our soils at the level that we have been degrading them. One thing I want to share with you all is I understand here in Japan there's a lot of embracement of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. The Regenerative Organic Certified Framework addresses or meets 14 of the 17 UN SDGs. And one that I find particularly relevant here is Goal 17, known as the Partnership for Goals. This Regenerative Organic Certified Framework was built out of collaboration, and collaborative endeavors are intrinsically part of the work that we're doing. It has to take collaborative efforts from brands, farmers, policymakers, and consumers. We're going to hear a lot more about that in a little bit when we hear from Dr. Bronner about the work they're doing and proving how this work can be done. At the end of the day, though, the ones who truly hold the most power to make change in our agricultural systems are each and every one of us. Many of us in this room get to choose what we eat 3 times a day. Most of us probably get to choose that. So we can choose to support farming that is regenerative and that is organic and that speaks these values and helps bring this much needed change to the world. The next slide here is the beloved Yvon Chouinard, also just mentioned and introduced by Marty. So the formation of the ROA really begins right here with this man. And he, of course, has this very well-known apparel division and a little-known food division. And so that food division is going to continue growing because Yvon Chouinard sees agriculture as a way to solve some of our biggest problems, and that we all do eat many times a day. In fact, you don't buy clothes as often, so you can continue to exert these choices and purchase products that meet the Regenerative Organic Certified Framework. He has dedicated countless hours from his company funding to initiate the beginning of the ROA, and contributed staff to help develop the standard, to help even here in this country, many of the farmers who are learning about regenerative organic certified practices are learning and working with the Patagonia Japan team. These kind of hours dedicated to helping build this framework have been instrumental in making this happen. And so they're one of our core founders. The other, of course, is Dr. Bronner's. As you see here, again, you'll hear more from Garo shortly, but Dr. Bronner's also helped form the ROA, and they've always been a brand that were ahead of their time and have been since 1948, when the founder first started making their famous soap, beloved to many hippie households in America and around the world, a soap that was very biodegradable, very environmentally friendly, and always upheld the highest standards in sourcing for organic and fair trade. Dr. Bronner's has continued to expand the work with the family, with multi-generational family members, continuing to advocate for their cosmic principles. And in those cosmic principles, they advocate for the regenerative organic certified approach to agriculture. And you'll see a lot more of that from Garo in just a few minutes. So I want to go on to the next slide, which is the other founder of the ROA, is the Rodale Institute. You may not be as familiar with the Rodale Institute here in Japan, but they are largely credited with bringing organic to America. In the 1930s or 1940s, when J.I. Rodale was a businessman in Manhattan and realized that his health, he wasn't well, he moved out to the countryside, took his family to the country, and inherently learned that growing his own food was better for his body. And he started exploring this further and further, and then he read Sir Albert Howard's book, which is an agricultural testament. And it was written based on traditional farming systems in India. And he learned much from Sir Albert Howard and applied those principles and started developing the movement for organic farming in the United States. His son, Robert Rodale, pictured here on the left side of the screen, is the one who is credited with coining the term regenerative as applied to agriculture. And he used this in a way that is an approach, a very holistic approach that encompasses all aspects of a community, looking at all the living beings in the community, looking at the economic aspects, and looking for continuous innovation in the farm so that farmers are never just landing at perfection. There's always a possibility to continuously improve what they're doing. The number one priority, though, that the Rodale Institute has been promoting is around the focus on soil health. And so if we look at this, number one priority being soil health, that it simultaneously encompasses high standards for animal welfare and social fairness, along with the soil health. And these are the three pillars that encompass the ROC framework that I'm here to tell you about. And I'll just share with you quickly the next slide of the different entities who serve on the board of directors with the Regenerative Organic Alliance. These came together with our three founders, and there were experts in ranching, in farming, in social equity and labor issues, in animal welfare, ranching, and these are the people who I answer to and who are constantly helping me keep the bar high so that we have set out this very aspirational standard for agriculture, and we are continuously reviewing the Regenerative Organic Certified Framework and making changes to it so that we can be responsive to emergent trends and to what is happening in the world of agriculture. And so that, I just want to add one more comment here that I think is a really powerful quote that I want to begin with for you all is, "We stand in most places on earth only 6 inches from desolation. for that is the thickness of the topsoil upon which the entire life of the planet depends. And so this brings me to this question: why do we need regenerative organic now? Industrial agriculture and factory farming are top contributors to climate change, as you can see here. 25, it's really, I think, more around 30% of our carbon emissions we can track back to industrial agriculture and the factory farming of animal. You might get tired of hearing me say this today, but if you take away anything, that is the one thing. Let it be this. Big ag and big pharma are making record profits, and they're not doing it because they care about you or they care about the planet. They are succeeding in the conventional agriculture sector because they are helping, I'm sorry, if you could advance that, thank you. So big ag and big pharma, for example, Roundup Ready corn and soy, these are plants that farmers are growing, and they have to depend on purchasing seeds from big ag and purchasing the chemicals that are used to grow non-GMO or GMO corn and soy. And so these chemicals that we're using are building up in our systems. They're building up in our bodies. They're building up in the soil, in the air, and in the water. And in all of the agricultural workers who have to apply these chemicals and work in those systems, these are accumulating, and we're getting sicker and sicker. Big ag, chemical ag, is not feeding the world, and it is not saving the planet. But the good news is there is a way that we can do this. And of course, I have to set you up with this to help show why regenerative organic is the solution. Agriculture is the problem, but it can be the solution. What we do to the soil, we do to ourselves. Soil is the bedrock of our civilization, of our food system, and degrading the soil threatens our entire way of life, from the productivity of our cropland to the health of the foods we eat, to the availability of materials we use for clothing, for personal body care products, and for everything else that we use in human commerce. The extraordinary diversity of microorganisms in the soil mirrors the diversity of ecosystems around the world and the diversity of organisms in the human gut. So when we deplete and erode the soil through industrial farming practices, we're endangering the complex balance of these systems, these natural systems. Regenerative organic farming systems restore and build soil, protect ecosystems, and protect people. And so here I come to a definition for regenerative organic. I'm going to get into more detail in this as I go through the Regenerative Organic Certified Framework, but you can look at regenerative organic agriculture as a collection of practices that focus on regenerating soil health and full farm ecosystem. In practice, this looks like cover cropping, crop rotation, minimizing your soil disturbance, or what you can call no-till or low-till, bringing in compost, zero use of persistent chemicals and herbicides and fertilizers and off-farm inputs. And you layer onto these practices depending on the farm's needs. And you layer on there the addition of perennials, of hedgerows, of animals for rotational grazing, building wildlife habitats, improving and incorporating agroforestry systems, and vegetative barriers. These are all examples of regenerative practices that farmers are implementing all over the world. And it really depends on that farm's particular situation, where its unique soil, its unique climate, and the unique cultural practices that go with that farm in that particular setting. So honestly, the regenerative organic framework is just a collection of practices that can be applied, and farmers can basically pick and choose what works for them in the farming environment in which they live. Soil health is, of course, intrinsically linked to the total health of our food system, and it affects everything from plant health to human well-being to the future of our planet. And We know that soil can also capture carbon if we follow the tenets of regenerative organic agriculture. I'm going to let the experts talk more on that later and not go into such detail on that. Really what I want to emphasize here is why regenerative organic certified, which I'm going to call ROC occasionally just for short, why the ROC was created. And this is because it is time to make very clear and calculated changes to our food and agricultural systems. We don't have time to waste. As Marty just explained, the IPCC report recently out, there's just no time to waste. We know agriculture can solve many of our greatest problems. And so by helping consumers go to the store and identify the regenerative organic certified seal and purchase foods and products grown with these methods, we can help answer an entire suite of values that a consumer brings to each shopping occasion. I want to just give you some highlights on how a farmer earns the regenerative organic certified. First off, our baseline is organic. If you could advance that next slide, thank you. The baseline is organic. So we also recognize international equivalencies. Anything that meets the USDA organic will meet the ROC requirements. But because we have the 3 pillars, we also require that if you have livestock, commercial livestock, the farmer has to get an animal welfare approved certification. And this is more common in the US and Australia, Brazil, where a lot of the world's meat is coming from these days, and we're going to get more into detail on that later. The 3rd pillar addressed here, I just have one symbol for Fair Trade International. It may be more familiar here. Social justice is very critical in agricultural work in many countries. And so we require that farms in the global south carry a fair trade certification such as Fair Trade International. And if it's a farm operating in the global north where there are more strict labor laws, then we don't necessarily require this fair trade certification, but we do require an audit is undergone with a competent trained auditor to go through all of the different principles of our social fairness pillar. And I'm just going to move on to that next slide here of the 3 pillars. You can see highlights. I'm sorry if it's a little hard to read in the back, but we've got our soil, animals, and humans. And I'm going to do a deeper dive into each one of these pillars here and share some of those principles with you in just a moment. One thing I want to also emphasize on the next slide is that we've got a buyer's criteria. And so any brands who are using the regenerative organic certified logo and claim on pack, these brands have assured you, the consumers, that they're paying a premium to the farmers, that they are signing long-term contracts with the farmers, and they are enabling capacity building at the ground level. And so this is something quite unique in the world of certification. I've worked in certification for almost my entire career. It's over 20 years now working in various different certifications. I've never seen a certification program that requires something quite as intense as this, and that forces the brands to really show full transparency and traceability. And so this is a really important topic in some sectors in particular. That's one I would say is in cotton. And if any of you are familiar what's been happening in cotton, there's tremendous demand for organic cotton, even more so for regenerative organic certified cotton. And therefore there's fraud happening, not in the regenerative organic yet, but in organic. There has been some real issues with fraud. And so traceability is really important, that you can show that this brand that is carrying forth this claim actually did source this product as regenerative organic certified, and they paid the premium to the farmer. Another really interesting aspect of our program is captured here with our 3 levels. And so each of these different levels requires a different number and scope of regenerative organic practices. So as farmers they're required to move through the different levels and incorporate more and more regenerative practices and bring more of their land into the program, so that they move from bronze to silver to gold over time. And this is really in order to recognize that some of the real weaknesses in organic are that it is a floor and a ceiling at the same time. And so once you get there, you don't ever really have to change. You can just keep doing the same thing. But there's always a possibility to be better. Every day I get up thinking how I can do better and be better. And farmers have that opportunity to show how they're working on continuous improvement on their farms every day. So I think this is a really interesting part of our program that I love to share with people. Now I'm gonna do a quick switch here. So we're going back to like 8th grade, 7th grade, looking at the carbon cycle. And I know we've got many esteemed scientists and academics in the room, sorry. I just wanna make sure we're all on the same, that we've got kind of level playing field, same understanding of the beautiful alchemy of photosynthesis. And this is something where we look at how plant leaves convert sunlight and CO2 into nutrients and sugars that they take down into the xylem, through the roots, into the root hairs of the plant. And it comes down into, well, you can't quite see it there, but they call this substance that comes out of the root hairs exudate. And you can think of the exudate as basically a really tasty treat in a form that specialized microbes can digest and exchange. And they do this exchange for key minerals in the soil that the plant roots can't access by themselves. They can't do this alone. The microbes, the soil microbes, are the critical link. And the mutually beneficial exchange causes the roots to go deeper into the soil, and the plants thus grow stronger. And this is a constantly looping exchange of energy and growth in all directions, up and down. And critically, the soil organic matter increases. With more soil organic matter, you get so many more benefits. The populations of the living organisms in the soil continue to multiply, but they also continue to decay. This creates more organic matter that fuels the continual growth in the living population, thus regenerating the soil. So thank you for going down memory lane with me. I just want to make sure we're all really clear on that cycle. And you might be wondering, why does this matter? Well, again, like I said earlier, what we do to the soil, we do to ourselves. And this is why healing the planet starts quite literally right under our feet. And it begins with that equation of soil, healthy soil, equals life. When soil is healthy, there are more organisms in 1 teaspoon of soil than humans on the planet. It was last estimated at 7.5 billion living organisms last year, and now recently they've increased it to 9 billion, because soil scientists are learning more every day about what's going on in that 1 teaspoon of soil. And they're learning, they've identified maybe 80% of the organisms living in the soil. And what they've learned is pretty startling, and we've got a lot more to learn and a long way to go. So building healthy soil is really essential to understanding why this movement is so important. And also consider that just 6 inches of topsoil cover the Earth's surface, and so it takes nature about 1,000 years on average to form 1 inch of soil. Farmers can do it much faster using these practices and integrating livestock. It takes a lot less time to destroy it. And so if you look here at modern chemical agriculture, you see the spray boom, you see these workers in Tyvek suits to protect them from the chemicals they're spraying. The compaction is destroying the very microbiome in that soil that we rely on to build healthy soil. So it's just such a contradiction, and it's really something that stemmed from World War II. There was leftover munitions from the war, and scientists were like, gosh, what are we gonna do with this? Well, they figured out they could use it to make fertilizer, and they could use it to make chemicals to destroy life and to increase the production with fertilizers. And so really, it seemed like a great idea at the time, but now we know much better. We know that chemical agriculture is not healthy for us, it's not healthy for the soil, and it's not healthy for the planet. As a result, we've lost at least 1/3 of our topsoil. And if you look at the next slide here, you can see an example of a modern farm in America. Like, it's compacted. The corn is like, of course they're suffering from drought, and there's all kinds of problems. Climate change is causing extreme weather everywhere around the world. And this is making it harder to farm, of course. And the harder it is to farm, the more chemicals these conventional farmers need to apply to get some form of yield that they can try to make some form of profit. And so really what we want to do is move from this model into a next model where we're really looking deep into the soil. Because the deeper we look, the more heroes in the soil we will find. This is a farm just north of me in Northern California, a dairy farm that practices rotational grazing and is renowned for their work in building healthy soil. And really, they've got a soil matter of 10 to 12% soil organic matter, which is quite astounding in compared to most farms where it's 3 to 5% soil organic matter. But it shows what you can do by integrating regenerative organic methods and bringing animals onto the farm. And as I mentioned earlier, just looking at what modern agricultural practices are doing, they're destroying the rich and diverse soil that makes life possible. And really, in the geological blink of an eye, in those 70 years since the end of the war and the beginning of modern chemical farming, humans have undone thousands of years of natural ecological balance. And in fact, scientists predict that we are on the cusp of the next mass extinction. So it's really important that we look at what's happening with species and plant diversity as it's being wiped out above the soil, in the soil, and also in our own bodies. And so this is especially evident in developing countries, in developed countries, where our diets are based on processed foods. Our soil microbiomes are starting to look like the farms that grow our food, and we're sicker than ever. If you look at the rates of diet-related illnesses in the US in particular, it's staggering. And the cost of this to human society goes quite beyond compare. So really, if we want to look at the science on microbial interactions within humans, just like it is with soil science, within our soil microbiome is equally emergent. It's advancing very rapidly, and we're learning what is happening in the gut microbiome. And so one example, you might think that serotonin is the pleasure-seeking, fun-loving hormone is produced in your brain, but actually 90% of it is produced in your gut, and you need a healthy gut microbiome to do that. So it sounds like eating healthier food might lead to having a little bit more fun, and I kind of like that idea. The other thing I think is really fascinating is that human cells are outnumbered by microbes by a 10-to-1 ratio. So you are more microbe than you are human. And these microbes are everywhere, on our skin, on our lips, all over our bodies, as well as in our microbiome and in the gut microbiome and in the soil microbiome. And so really just wanting to make a plea for thinking about healthy soil and how it grows healthy food, because this is one of the other things that scientists are learning now, is that we have a far greater bionutrient availability in foods that are grown in healthy soil. And the Rodale Institute is also showing this with a lot of their science right now, looking at tillage. And what tillage does is it reduces the fungal biomass in the soil. This disrupts and destroys the mycelium that is responsible for all that wonderful exchange of nutrients that we talked about earlier. And so testing how a concentration of ergothioneine is ergothioneine, they call is the longevity, is for the longevity nutrient, is something that is in crops as a function of soil health, is being wiped out through tillage. Humans don't get it by eating it or by taking a supplement. You have to get it through the soil. It has to come through healthy soil and the mycelium that is in that soil. So I won't get out of my lane here, since we've got some wonderful scientists who probably will speak on this shortly, but I just want to show you how regenerative agriculture, minimal tillage, crop rotation, using cover crops will yield more nutritious harvests. And so over time, as we start to see this, if we are purchasing food grown in healthy soil, it's going to be better for us, and we will not have to purchase quite as much. So I want to close on the soil pillar section with one more slide, please. This next example is a really great visual. So have any of you ever had the Patagonia Provisions mango, dried mango fruit? Show of hands, anybody? Just a handful of you, okay. Well, this is one of the farms in Nicaragua where they purchase these tropical fruits. And you can see here on the right is the regenerative organic farm here on the hillside. And you can see there's no exposed soil. Soil's not running off. Everything is being held intact. And this is just a really great visual that I wanted to share with you because I was actually here at this inspection. And right next to this farm was their conventional neighbor, who I think was actually organic. And you can see the soil is just running down the hillside. The nutrients are being lost and running into the river. And that farmer who's farming that little plot on that steep hillside is not doing well. They're not having a really abundant harvest, right? So we're going to talk more about that in a few minutes, about the diversification and how farmers, regenerative organic farmers, are doing better by building in these methods of regenerative practices. But I first, before we get to that, I want to talk to you a little bit about meat, protein. And I'm not making any judgment here. This is, we have many ecological problems that come from our ecological footprints, coming from the choices we make with what we eat. And there's no judgment about whether people eat meat or practice a vegetarian diet, but it is proven that if we eat a diet heavy in industrial factory meat, is bad for the planet. And so I want to talk to you about this topic of global livestock production. I was really surprised to learn that that Japan is one of the US's biggest export markets. We are sending you all of our feedlot meat. It's not a good thing. I'm sorry for that. There's a way to change it, though. And so I want to make sure that you all understand how meat is being produced in America under these factory-like conditions. And it really isn't pretty. And so we do have a little warning here. Next slide, please. Disturbing content ahead. And for me, this is pretty disturbing. These pigs live in crates. They call gestation crates for sows that have piglets, where they are in a crate their entire life, basically. And they have their piglets, and they make sure that the sows can't roll over and crush the piglets, and they never get to move from this place. Now, these are piglets that have graduated from suckling on the mama pigs and gone into their own crates. But one thing that really struck me years ago, I worked for a certification program that did humane certification for livestock, and something that they do routinely on pork farms is they cut the tails of the piglets and they grind their teeth. And the reason they do that is because of overcrowding and because of competition for the teat, that the piglets will chew each other's tails up to get to the mama's teat, to get the milk. And so there's always going to be a couple runts that have to be culled and euthanized or killed because they aren't strong enough to get there, and because the pigs are being bred to have so many piglets, they don't have enough milk to sustain them. And so it's a really disturbing trend that happens in the pork industry. And I won't even begin to talk about all the waste that comes from this operation. But if you want to think about the manure that comes off of this operation and where it goes, it's usually situated in a very poor community. A lot of them are in the Carolinas, and these communities don't really have a voice to stop these hog farms from coming in. And they have the pollution in the air is pretty appalling. It's hard to breathe. People can't hang their laundry out to dry. They have to wear masks. They have respiratory problems. The water is completely contaminated by the disposal of the manure that comes from this factory-like sow farm. And so these are pretty, unfortunately, pretty ubiquitous in areas where we grow pork in the US and in Eastern Europe. Cows, that's a whole other topic. feedlot as far as the eye can see. And so what happens here? These cows are living in squalor. They live in manure. It's dirty. They're sick, so they are fed antibiotics every day and growth hormones, because who grows and thrives under those conditions? Nobody. So they give them growth hormones and antibiotics so that they can grow to get to a stage where they can harvest them for meat. And this, the urine and feces from the smallest CAFO, and that would be one of these, is equal to the urine and feces produced by 16,000 humans. Some of these CAFOs can produce or can host hundreds of thousands of animals. And most of the CAFOs are for dairy, cows, hogs, and chickens. They also have them for beef cattle, but they're typically kept in these areas for at least 45 to 60 days without any vegetation and just living in these paddocks, and food is imported and brought to them, and then all of their manure, their excrement is exported. So we're spending all this money and labor to bring this to them and then to remove it. The system makes no sense. This final one that I want to share with you is how chickens are raised in a modern broiler environment and egg-laying operations. If you're looking at a conventional egg or broiler farm, this is what it looks like. And the animals are sick. They have all kinds of problems with their feet. Because they're genetically bred to grow meat very quickly, so fast, in fact, that their legs and feet can't support the weight that they gain in 5 weeks. Because most of the chickens, the broilers, they go to slaughter within 6 weeks. The egg-laying hens, they stick around for maybe a year and a half or 2 years before they're composted. This is not a good life, and it is also an area, a place where these animals are sick. And so they are also fed subtherapeutic doses of antibiotics in their feed every day. And there's other problems with that besides the fact that it's disturbing. But humans now have antibiotic resistance. So much that there were, 2.8 million antibiotic resistant infections in the US per year. 35,000 people die from these. So I don't know how it's happening here in Japan, but in the US we have a real serious problem. And the problem I see for you is that you're sadly importing our terrible model of agriculture because you're eating this meat. And so it's something, sorry, it's a little disturbing, but I wanted to make you aware of and set the framework for why it is important to have animals that are raised on pasture and that have humane treatment. And so our our animal welfare pillar has all of these principles for animal welfare and the freedoms that animals deserve to have, which is expressed in the 5 freedoms here on the next slide. These 5 freedoms are, I can't read the Japanese, but the freedom from fear and distress, freedom from discomfort, freedom, really what it all boils down to is the freedom to express natural behaviors. And research has spanned for 3 decades, showing that pasture-based livestock, their diets, the meat coming from those animals have significantly improved the fatty acid composition and antioxidant content of the meat. So if you eat meat from pasture-raised animals, especially ruminants designed to grow on pasture, it's healthier for you. You're going to find it's a much healthier meat. It's lower in fat. You have more vitamin A and E, lower total unsaturated fat than the meat coming from grain-fed animals. And so it's highly recommended if you choose to eat meat that you eat, I would say, less better meat. So we eat grass-fed meat from animals coming from operations that allow animals to express these natural behaviors. This image here is from one of our clients in Tennessee, and I just thought it was really fun to share. This is a farm. It's a brand called Ancient Nutrition. I don't know if that's distributed here. They are a supplement company, but they're so excited about regenerative organic certified. They now have 2 farms and growing. In this one farm, they had these 2 properties in Tennessee and Missouri, and they wanted to use intensive holistic grazing techniques and mirror the experiment across the 2 different properties. So they split up the acreage. They had 53 acres. They split it into 75, like 0.7 acres, less than 1 acre paddocks, and they grazed them with water buffalo, cows, sheep, goats, chicken, ducks, and turkeys. And initially, their livestock team was really nervous to see how all these ruminants would handle being together. Would the water buffalo accidentally step on the lambs? Would the cow butt heads with the goats? And in time, they found that these animals reached an equilibrium. A pecking order, pardon the pun, began to form as the water buffalo became the clear hierarchical rulers of these systems. And as you can see here, the animals are living in harmony. Speaking of harmony, I also want to talk a bit more. I'm going to touch on our 3rd pillar, which is around social fairness and the labor realities of agriculture. So you may not see that here in Japan, where you have really strict labor laws and you take care of people and make sure they have safe working conditions and they earn a living wage, and there is no probably issue of child labor or trafficked labor here. Well, that, unfortunately, is a reality in much of the world. In the US, over 65% of our agricultural labor come from undocumented individuals. This means people who have no protection under the law. So essentially, these people are working, oftentimes, working in slave-like conditions. And they've even found people chained up. They've found trafficked. It's a real problem. It's such a problem that you see these signs everywhere. If you go to Central America, if you're in the south border of the United States, this sign, which isn't translated, but basically that sign there says, "Are you safe? Do you need freedom? Call here." And you can text, you can call. There are organizations helping to try and solve this problem of trafficked human labor. And it's still happening. So this is why the social pillar of the Regenerative Organic Framework is really important. Our social framework makes sure that people are earning wages that they can live on, and that really that it empowers the workers. One of the other issues we really see a lot in agriculture, I'd say 8 out of 10 women, I think is the statistic, women in agriculture experience sexual harassment. 8 out of 10. And they can't report it to their manager. Very likely it is their manager. And so workers need support, they need help, and they need some form of a certification like the ROC framework, where somebody comes in and ensures that people are able to experience these kind of conditions. And I wanted to share some examples of a couple of our farms. This one is Elliott Green. They are fair trade and organic, and now they're regenerative organic certified as well, and producing all kinds of wonderful products that you probably can experience right here. They're not far away. They're over in Indonesia, and they gave me a list of some of the things, some of the benefits they see from the labor portion, the social fairness portion of our certification. And they said they include district and village level authorities in business decisions to enable, to empower communities and build more capacity. They provide finance, inputs, training, and extension services to farmers to promote regenerative organic principles. They're trying to bridge the gender gap by achieving equal pay and gender-neutral job evaluation, and facilitating farmer inclusion. So as they said, their amazing founder said, the social fairness pillar of the ROC establishes the highest standard of fair treatment for farm workers, including living wages and good working conditions. ROC is a certification that reflects and enforces our values. And I want to share one other one with you, and then we're going to move quickly because we're going to be running out of time soon. So to the next slide here, these are our friends with the Lotus Foods. They are producing, they work with a lot of women to build capacity and and capacity building for the workers and women empowerment. And they're really transforming how rice is grown with their regenerative organic no-till system of rice intensification method that they call more crop per drop. This is a system that may not apply necessarily here, but is working very well in the places where Lotus Family Farm is working. And ensuring a living wage and fair treatment of their farmers is something that they apply in all of their channels where they produce or purchase rice around the world. They're working with farmers around Cambodia, India, and also in the southeast of the United States. And they're taking these social fairness principles and applying them to help the workers in these communities. And let's see, there's a lot of short stories like this I could share with you, but we're gonna run out of time really quickly. And so I wanted to share, I brought a couple videos, and one is, I'm gonna show next. It's a little loud, and so I want you to envision yourself in the middle of a monsoon. This is a regenerative organic farm in Arizona, the Southwest.
About at least 60 miles out of wind right now.
They had wind gusting over 60, 70 miles per hour, and rain in sheets heavier than Arizona has seen in many, many years. Again, another example of climate change. Extreme weather happening all around the world. Their neighbors lost 2 to 3 inches of topsoil just running down the road. And then you looked at, you can see there, the grass and the cover crop at this farm soaked all that water in, and they were able to catch that water and keep it for later use and keep it from running off and keep from losing the fertility that they had spent so much time building up in their soil. And the next slide, it shows a vineyard in central California where we just experienced, I don't know if you saw in the news, there were 11 or 12 atmospheric rivers that came and sat on top of us in California. I'm from Northern California. In fact, we had a workshop at this vineyard that got canceled because they got, I think, 5 inches of rain, which normally would just gush down the road. As it did, it washed out the road. In this next slide, you can see it washed out the road and caused, you can see the vineyards behind it, the cover crop, and this deep root profile. And those roots held onto the soil, they held the water, and our friends at Tablas Creek fared quite well during these atmospheric rivers, and not the same for their neighboring vineyards, who had more destruction than I can share with you right now. I do want to share this wonderful video. This is another client of ours, Organic India, and the founder, she states it really beautifully in her video, so I'm going to just let this play for you.
You see what it looked like when we started our farm. It just looked like barren, cracked, dry land. And now it's flourishing. So much grows and has such a good energy, and it's nurturing so many people. It nurtures itself, the people who work on the farm, as well as all the products that are grown on the farm and that are grown by the farmers. And they saw the regenerative agriculture improve their land year after year, so they actually got a larger amount of produce on for each crop each year as they keep putting the right inputs and utilizing the land in a regenerative, organic way. And regenerative agriculture is about honoring all life and how to work with Mother Nature in a divine partnership.
So I love how she brings that to light and shows the story of what happened. They work with thousands of smallholders in India. And one thing I will comment on is what I've seen in the few years that I've been doing this work. The certification has been only going for about 2 years during a time of a global pandemic, mind you. We still have grown quite substantially. We have almost 50,000 smallholder farmers are covered under our program. Keep in mind that it says 129 farms certified, but one of those farms might represent 1,000 smallholders that you just saw about in the Organic India or from the Dr. Bronners, where Garo will talk about momentarily. We've covered over 700,000 acres of land. I'm very proud of that, and we have almost 100 brands now licensed, brands that are eager to support the farmers to buy these crops at a premium and bring it to market. I was just at a trade show where they're showing some preliminary analysis that is showing that the regenerative organic certified products are getting premiums of 40% over what a conventional product is. So we're seeing real success in the marketplace. And just to be clear, this is a farm-based certification. So farmers get certified, brands get licensed, and they undergo the buyer's criteria audit and all of that and show how they are supporting the farmers at the farm level. We have lots of products coming to market, more and more every day. I expect to see continued growth. I'm really excited to learn more from all the panelists here today and see what we can do to advance regenerative organic agriculture here in Japan. And so I hope I can come back next year and we see a whole bunch of products coming from producers here, farmers here, who are learning to implement these methods and bring these important products to market in partnership with Patagonia Provisions and many of the others in this room. So I think with that, I am going to say thank you so much for your attention. I hope I wasn't too fast and that we were able to get through everything, and look forward to meeting with you all later during opportunities for conversation. Thank you.
エリザベスさん、ありがとうございました。